This is a bonus episode of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliet Jeske. Each week, I watch and analyze a whole heck of a lot of Fox News and then break it down. I watch all the Fox News you'd never want to, although this episode, we're not talking about Fox News. No, we're not. I know. What? What happened? We're talking about Donald J. Trump, the person I cannot stand to the core of my being. And I'm not going to lie about that. This is not a both sides kind of, I'm objective. And I don't want to approach if you follow this account, January 6th, I think the man is a criminal. That was it. I'm like, done. I have no idea why he's allowed to run for president after he tried to overthrow the government. So I don't care. I also think he's a rapist, and a jury, that I tweeted about that the other day. It went completely viral. A jury found him legally liable for sexually assaulting a woman named E. Jean Carroll. Oh, all right then. So I'm not fond of Donald J. Trump. Not fond. Now, the reason why I'm focusing on Trump and not Biden is it was a train wreck for Biden. Very depressing, heartbreaking to watch. I am not going to advocate for him dropping out or not dropping out. I'm staying completely neutral on that. I'm not a pollster. I don't have experience in the Democratic Party. I actually don't know enough about the mechanisms of how he would be replaced. I don't feel comfortable talking about it. However, I understand both sides of this argument, and I just wish people would not scream at each other so much on Twitter about it, but I get it. We're in a tough spot here. We're in a tough spot. That was a terrible, terrible performance. But if I can do anything positive, it's to point out all of the lies that Donald J. Trump told. And that's what I'm going to do. The reason why I'm doing this and the reason why I published it a couple days late, most, fact checks come out minutes, hours of the debate because they're coming out from legacy media and they have huge teams and they're rushing to get them out because you've got to get them out with speed. I'm niche media. The only people who listen to Decoding Fox News are super nerds who love the news, who love digesting this stuff. You guys are very, very smart. You always correct things. You get things right. You know what you're talking about. This is a very, very bright group. I don't consider you average Americans. So niche media, I don't care. I'm just going to go next level with this. I'm going to publish it a couple days late because I had to, because that's how long it took me. I would estimate the print version of this. If you're a subscriber to Decoding Fox News, you've gotten the print version of part 1 and part 2. Took me about 20 hours nonstop work, 2 days to do it. Nonstop, just constantly. Very, very difficult, but I'm happy that I did it. It's doing very, very well in my ratings. I've gotten great feedback on it. So we're going to try to make this into a podcast. Hopefully I won't rant about Trump too much because I do hate that man, and I'm not going to hide it. Also, if you want to check out fact checks of Biden in the print version, which is at my Substack channel for Decoding Fox News, you can find it, and I have many hyperlinks. You can go and read them, and they're very high-quality fact checks. Highly recommend. If you're wondering what is the newsletter, if this is the first episode you've ever listened to, that is at my Substack channel for Decoding Fox News, which is how I live. That's how I make my living. If you'd like to become a financial supporter of this micro-budget media project, you can go to Decoding Fox News at Substack or Decoding Fox News at Patreon. All paid subscribers and paid supporters get exclusive content. Now, all of this, the fact check, is available for anyone because I wanted as many people as possible to see it. So let's get into it. Now, very briefly, what Trump does. If you've watched one of his rallies, and I've watched several of them with a fine-tooth comb, I've gone over this debate in its entirety 3 times. So I've sat through this thing 3 painful times. I'm laughing to keep from crying, guys. I'm laughing to keep from crying. But I did. I went through it 3 times. What he does is a common Trump habit is he'll go lie, topic A, lie, topic B, lie, topic C, lie. And it's just like boom, 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 boom. And what I did, and what all their fact checkers did, because they all did the same thing, is you kind of have to unravel those little balls of lies and separate the categories. Because it's like flooding the zone with garbage. You can't keep up. It's like a narcissist, like abusive narcissist, which is what Trump is. So we're going to start with the economy. And this was right at the very beginning. And here we go. Buckle up, everybody. This is a journey. We're going on a journey.
We're the greatest economy in the history of our country.
You are a liar. Okay, that is not true. So economies can actually be judged against each other. They are measured by several different metrics: GDP growth, inflation, employment, trade, interest rates, etc. Some presidents who had stronger economies than Trump were Harry S. Truman, Lyndon B. Johnson, and Bill Clinton. And that's got to burn him. It's got to burn him a little bit. Bill Clinton. Also, just briefly, Barack Obama inherited an absolute disaster when he was president and managed to turn things around, which Trump inherited. So just saying. Next up.
The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce back jobs, a bounce back from the COVID.
And that would be false. Since Biden took office in 2021, the economy gained 5.6 million jobs that went to foreign-born Americans. Native-born Americans also gained 7.4 million jobs. The category of foreign-born Americans includes immigrants that are in the United States legally. Many of them have lived here for decades. Midway through 2022, Biden surpassed the pre-pandemic level of jobs and has since added 6.2 million jobs. So shove it. What you said was inaccurate. Next up, and this is a favorite of mine. This one I was like screaming at my computer.
The fact is that his big kill on the black people is the millions of people that he's allowed to come in through the border. They're taking black jobs now, and it could be 18, it could be 19, and even 20 million people. They're taking black jobs, and they're taking Hispanic jobs, and you haven't seen it yet, but you're going to see something that's going to be the worst in our history.
Thank you.
So what on earth is a black job? I mean, seriously, what is that? But there's a lot to unpack here. So first, Trump repeats the lie. He said this multiple times in the debate, multiple times, that 18 million to 20 million undocumented immigrants have entered the country since Biden took office. He then coins the phrase black jobs and Hispanic jobs to describe jobs that migrants allegedly are taking from U.S. citizens. Trump is implying that only black and Latino Americans would have the type of jobs where undocumented workers could replace them, which I think is very obviously incredibly racist. Now, some undocumented immigrants, of course, are highly trained, have advanced degrees, that sort of thing, and can waltz in, even with all of that, it would still be difficult to get a job because they entered illegally and they are undocumented. But it just puts them at a huge disadvantage at getting a job. But most, I think it's fair to say, undocumented immigrants are coming here from a desperate circumstance, and they end up in a pretty rough job where they're exploited by an employer. They're not paid well. They're not necessarily skilled. They don't necessarily have an education. So you're implying that they're only taking black and Latino jobs, which is horrible. Why are you saying that? Oh my goodness. I will say this very quickly. If you want to see some fun videos, check out #BlackJobs or me at my black job. Very funny responses on that from very successful black Americans who are openly making fun of Trump. Okay, so yes, next up we have, this is along the same theme. This one took a little bit to unpack.
But when they see what I did for criminal justice reform and for the historically black colleges and universities, where I funded them and got them all funded.
So I'm adding this because I couldn't fit it in the newsletter, but I wanted to add this for the podcast. So Donald J. Trump, in 1989, there was a crime, a horrendous crime, where a woman was jogging in Central Park. She was attacked and raped. And the person hit her so hard in the head that she couldn't remember the crime at all. She was in the hospital. She ended up recovering, but she had major injuries from it. At the time, public outcry was, we have to find this person. We have to find this person. And 5 young men, some of them were minors, some of them were young adults, got swept up in this. They were out in the park that night. They were interrogated by police. They were basically railroaded. Their stories didn't really make sense. They didn't line up with the evidence, but they were all convicted. Years later, somebody came forward, said, I did it. DNA matched. And the person who was already incarcerated had a long rap sheet of doing the exact same crime to other women. In fact, he attacked other women after this incident. So while these 5 young men went to prison for a crime they didn't commit, this rapist was still raping women. Now, at the time, when these 5 young men were convicted, Donald J. Trump took out a full-page ad in the New York Times saying he wanted them to get the death penalty. These were young men who were all Black and Latino and, came from poor families. It's part of the reason why they got railroaded, part of the reason why they were incarcerated. They've all been exonerated. One of them is now a city council member. Donald J. Trump has never apologized for this or tried to make this right. He still insists they did it. I can't make this up. So just shove it with your whole criminal justice reform. You're a horrible person. So another thing that he did, he talks about his HBCU, that's historically Black colleges and universities. Now, this is just nonsense because he tries to act like he saved them. He didn't use it in the debate, but he will sometimes use the phrase of, I saved them. He signed something called the Future Act, which Congress passed in 2019. The legislation made permanent $255 million in annual STEM funding, that's science, technology, engineering, and math, for minority-serving colleges, including roughly $85 million specifically allocated to historically Black colleges and universities. One co-sponsor for the bill said that the only thing Trump contributed to the legislation was his signature. So he didn't have anything to do with this. He just signed it. There was a whole movement to get this thing going because we always funded HBCUs, but it was like a thing they had to do every single year. And this made the funding a little bit more permanent, like will always happen. We don't have to fight for it every single year. So that's it. And then this one, another one about Black voters.
He's lost much of the Black population because he's done a horrible job for Black people.
So some polls have shown that Trump has made inroads with Black voters. Some polls have shown this. The gains have been relatively small, but, normally Black voters overwhelmingly vote for Democrats. So it is a concern. However, to say he's lost most of the Black population is a complete exaggeration. And no one's voted yet, so we don't actually know who's lost whom. It's just all speculative. Also, he says this constantly. He didn't say it in the debate, but he says it constantly in his rallies, that the Black unemployment rate was the lowest under his administration. At the time it was, but Biden has since beat that number. So Black unemployment, I have this memorized, under Trump was 5.3%. Under Biden, the lowest it got was 4.8%. Those numbers change all the time. They go up, they go down. It's not at 4.8% now, but it did get to the lowest rate it's ever been under Joe Biden. Another thing that Trump will lie about is he says that the poverty rate among Black Americans was the lowest during his administration. Again, it was for the time, but Joe Biden beat that number. So the lowest official poverty rate for Black individuals during the Trump administration was 18.8%. The lowest under Biden for the year 2022, which is the most recent data I can get, it got as low as 17.1%. Yes, so you're lying. We're going to keep going. Here we go.
Inflation's killing our country. It is absolutely killing us. Thank you. The inflation. He's blaming inflation, and he's right. It's been very bad. He caused the inflation.
So this is a wild exaggeration on his part. Inflation has dramatically cooled from its post-pandemic spike of 9.1% in June of 2022. After the inflation rate hit 9.1%, it dropped nearly every month and has since settled around 3.1 to 3.5% with some movement up and down. And that's year to year. That's what that rate means. So most economists, including the Federal Reserve, which is, the central bank, think the ideal rate is 2%. There is debate on this. I can't waste too much time on this because we got to keep going. But yes, there's some economists that say 1%. There's some economists that actually say 3%, believe it or not. So the annual inflation rate for the United States was 3.3 for the 12 months ending May. Again, that's year to year, compared to the previous rate of 3.4%, according to U.S. Labor Department data published on June 12, 2024. The United States has had much longer periods with higher rates of inflation and higher interest rates than we are currently experiencing. There is debate over the cause of inflation, but it is not unique to the United States. Inflation was much higher in other countries when the rate was peaked at 9.1% in the U.S. Many have argued that inflation was caused, and again, there's debate on this. Governments infusing their economies with cash to prevent an economic collapse during the pandemic, increased energy costs, and supply chain problems caused by shutdowns during COVID-19. During the pandemic, energy production slowed to a crawl during shutdowns and refineries reduced their output. Near the end of the pandemic, energy prices shot up after demand for fuel dramatically increased as economies were coming back to life and energy companies couldn't keep up with increased prices. Wages have also outpaced the rate of inflation for the past 12 months. I found multiple sources on that. People say that's not true. I'm like, keep looking it up, people. It's true. Wages have outpaced the rate of inflation for the past 12 months. It's been a roller coaster. What happened to the supply chain is we couldn't get anything anywhere. And so companies who, let's say you're trying to make a refrigerator, you need a part. You get that part from China. You can't get that part because everything's clogged up because of the shutdowns. You can't get that part. So you're waiting for that part. And while you're waiting for that part, your orders are backed up and backed up and backed up. And then other things that you normally would buy to make that refrigerator start costing more because of all these slowdowns in the screw ups in the supply chain. And suddenly now that refrigerator that maybe retailed at $2,000 is now going to cost $2,200 just because your cost got higher. And now spread that out through the entire manufacturing and trade situation. Boom, you had inflation. It can also be argued. We also had this avian flu that was absolutely horrible, one of the worst ever on record. And yeah, I'm sure there was some corporate greed involved in that too, because companies took advantage of the fact that prices were rising and said, let's just raise our prices anyway, see if we can get away with it. I'm sure that happened, and there's been evidence that happened. So that's what we're dealing with. It's certainly not Joe Biden's fault. This happened all over the world, and you can go back and you can find evidence of it. So, now next up, we have an absolutely crazy thing he said. At this point, I was like, just shut up, shut your mouth, you stupid, stupid man.
You look at the cost of food where it's doubled and tripled and quadrupled.
Again, what are you talking about? You're just making stuff up. Food costs have increased during Biden's presidency, largely caused by, again, post-pandemic related inflation. The U.S. also experienced the worst bouts of avian flu, which I just mentioned, that caused the price of poultry and eggs to fluctuate dramatically. We all saw that. We all saw the $9 eggs for a minute there. They're not that expensive anymore. The cost of food has increased 21% since Biden took office. But if broken down by year, the annual increase is closer to 6%. Wages have also increased during this time and have outpaced inflation for the past 12 months, which I just said. If food prices quadrupled, as Trump claimed, consumers would see a 300% increase in prices. Now, would you be going to the store and everything would cost 300% more? I mean, think about that. We're not at that. It's not great. Inflation's not fun. Nobody likes inflation. Nobody. Also, just want to point out, because I couldn't really do this again in the newsletter, he's not going to be able to magically get prices to go down. Once they go up, they go up. They don't come down. We can slow the rate, but we can't really get them down. Some things you can get down. Like if you notice, if you go to the store, like fresh produce, those prices vary. Raw materials like flour, butter, milk, those prices will vary. They go up and down. Eggs, obviously. One thing that won't go up and down is prepared foods, which Americans eat a lot of. So if you buy like something frozen, if it's frozen food's gotten crazy expensive. If you go to the store and you see frozen food for $8, it's not going to go down to $6 because Trump is president. That's not how inflation works, because the materials that they made to make that frozen food were like months ago. Then it's processed and frozen, and that's the price. That's what the price is going to be. It's not going to magically go down. There's no president on this planet could magically cause the price of stuff like that to go down. They just can't. Prices are going to fluctuate up and down. And I will add, I didn't touch this one because it was actually considered a Biden lie, which I thought was ridiculous and petty. This is why I didn't do a Biden fact check. I'm going to go on a slight rant. One of the things that Biden said is that economists said that Trump's trade policies could increase prices for the average American of about $2,500 a year. And some fact checkers got him on that because the number they came up with was $2,350. And I said, what is wrong with you? I get that you're fact checking that, but that is so petty. One of the other things I'm going to rant about is when I saw some of these fact checks, they would go back and forth between Trump and Biden. And I'm like, this is what's wrong with media. I get why you're doing that. You want to look like you're being fair, but this was not a fair situation. You had somebody lying every single time he spoke, every single time he spoke. It was just exhausting to go through this. So stop it with this, 2,500 is 2,350. That's a very small amount. And there's a range, because I looked it up. It's actually a range. Biden was getting the high part of the range, but it was still considered within the range of what some economists are predicting.
I want to follow up. You want to impose a 10% tariff on all goods coming into the U.S. How will you ensure that that doesn't drive prices even higher?
It's not going to drive them higher. It's just going to cost countries that have been ripping us off for years, like China and many others, in all fairness to China. It's going to just force them to pay us a lot of money, reduce our deficit tremendously, and give us a lot of power for other things.
This is why the man frustrates me so much. It's not just that he has horrible, repugnant views. It's not that he just sucks up to dictators and is weirdly obsessed with Putin and is probably in cahoots with Putin or Lord knows what. I don't know what's going on there, but it's always been very creepy with Russia. Incredibly creepy. Praises Kim Jong-un. Just complete, maniacal, authoritarian, all of it. Hate it. Hate this man. But this is another reason why I hate him. He has no idea what he's talking about. And yet he's pushing tariffs because he thinks it's 1953. I have no idea. He does not know how tariffs work. He's constantly misrepresenting how tariffs work. This is how a tariff works. If I'm going to buy a widget from Mexico, let's make it nice and easy. Mexico, which we already have trade agreements with Mexico, so I'm not sure how you're going to slap on a 10% tariff to everything. But okay, I'll humor you. That widget's going to cost $1. Now I got a 10-cent tariff that I got added to it. I'm a U.S. importer. I pay $1.10 for the item. 10 cents goes to the federal government. Got it. Ooh, the federal government got a little bit of money from a U.S. importer, by the way. That U.S. importer is now going to sell that to a wholesaler, who's now going to sell it to a retailer, or however the chain goes. And by the time it ends up in a Walmart, the price might be $3, $5, depending on what that is, depending on what happened to it, all these things. Okay, so now if that wholesale import cost was $1 and suddenly it becomes $1.10, that extra 10 cents is going to move down the chain and it will just get passed on to consumers. And whatever they bought before will now suddenly cost more money. So China is not getting hurt by this at all. The point of tariffs, in theory, is supposed to be, I have a U.S. good, here's an import. I want to make the U.S. good more competitive, more attractive to a retailer in the United States. So I'm going to slap tariffs on that imported good to make them roughly the same price or make the American product cheaper. That's what they're trying to do. Some items, tariffs can make sense, but you have to be very careful about where you place those tariffs. And you better believe that China is going to slap tariffs on our exports to China. That's what they do. So for some things it makes sense. For other things it does not make sense. And so what Trump is saying is he's just saying, I'm going to put 10% on everything. So here's how that works. You get a cheap plastic toy block for your little kid. That's probably going to be made in Asia, somewhere in a low-wage country where the labor doesn't cost much. And it's a simple, probably not a pleasant job, but it's a job at a factory and they make plastic blocks. Boom. In the United States, our workers cost a lot more money, and we also have advanced technology. We're well known for making big equipment. So the U.S., I looked all of this up for this. Our number one exports are things like tractors, heavy machinery, transportation equipment, computers, electronics, vehicles, medical equipment, and commercial aircraft parts. So when you're paying a worker, let's say $25 an hour to work at a factory to make a John Deere tractor. I don't know how much they make. I'm lowballing that probably. You're going to make something that's a very expensive, top of the line, apparently I learned this in grad school. Our tractors are sought after all over the world. American tractors are considered like the best, which makes sense. We have, large agriculture sector, but I get it. But yes, so people will pay top dollar for an American tractor. They're not going to buy a cheap plastic block from America because the lowest we can pay a worker is nothing compared to what they can pay a worker in China. And we can go a whole conversation about that, but I don't have time for it in this fact check. So it just doesn't make sense to slap a 10% tariff on something that an American manufacturer does not make. If we don't make it in this country, people want to buy it anyway. It just doesn't make sense to put a tariff on that. But that's Trump. He's stupid. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And every time I see him in one of his, I'm getting worked up again. Every time I see him talk about his stupid trade deals, I'm just yelling at the screen because he's just lying. He has no idea what he's talking about. And then it's incredibly dangerous that this man could be our president again. And if you're like me, if you're somebody who's seen a bunch of his rallies, you can understand why I'm just sitting here going, shut up! He's just lying. He's just lying. Okay, now we're going to talk about taxes. Everybody loves talking about taxes.
But I gave you the largest tax cut in history.
No, you did not, liar. Ronald Reagan's tax cut in 1981 amounted to 2.89% of the GDP. Trump's tax cut was nearly 0.9, so 0.9% of the GDP. Trump's tax cut was the 8th largest in the past century, but smaller than 2 tax cuts passed during the Obama administration. Ouch! Trump's tax cut also favored the wealthiest Americans and corporations, according to the Tax Policy Center. Households with incomes in the top 1% will receive an average tax cut of more than $60,000 in 2025, compared to the average tax cut of less than $500 for households in the bottom 60. And I think it's fair to say that most of the people listening to this podcast are in the bottom 60, if not, lower. Anyway, so here, another one on taxes.
Cut the taxes. As an example, the corporate tax was cut down to 21% from 39%, plus beyond that. We took in more revenue with much less tax, and companies were bringing back trillions of dollars back into our country.
The man is telling fairy tales. It's partly true, though. I'll give him that. So according to reporting by the New York Times, Trump's tax cut did increase investment in the U.S. economy and did help provide a modest pay increase for workers. But he promised that these tax cuts would pay for themselves. This sort of voodoo economics, we're going all the way back to George H.W. Bush. They did not pay for themselves. So like right-wing economists always say, if we cut taxes, it'll increase activity in the economy and they'll pay for themselves, even though we'll lose revenue. They did not. They did not even come close to paying for themselves. So they directly added more than $100 billion a year to the $34 trillion national debt, which rose almost $7.8 trillion during Trump's time in office. Trump promised that his tax cuts would increase wages from $4,000 to $9,000 per worker, but the average was closer to $750 per year over time. And what I found in my research, and again, this is like, I can go down so many rabbit holes, I don't have time, but 3 things are considered the 3 main factors that have caused our national debt to explode. It's not just spending. We could get on that forever. But 3 things that have caused the national debt to dramatically increase in the past few decades would be COVID-19, not good, a very expensive situation. The last recession, the fact that we had this near economic collapse, we had to pull ourselves out of it, and tax cuts. These huge, huge tax cuts that did not pay for themselves just cause all kinds of problems. And Trump was one of them. So I fear for our country for so many reasons if he's reelected. So we got another tax one. Here we go. Fun times.
He wants to raise your taxes by 4 times. He wants to raise everybody's taxes by 4 times.
So you can see how I'm just screaming now again. You could just picture me in my tiny apartment with my little laptop going, shut up. Okay, so he's just lying. Where is he getting this 4 times? I have no idea. I've seen him say this in his rallies. It's never true. If Trump's numbers were accurate, this would mean a 300% tax increase. Joe Biden has proposed a 7% tax increase over the next decade. About 93% of Biden's tax increases would apply to the top 1% of taxpayers or Americans making just under $1 million a year. According to Biden's plan, which would have to be approved by Congress, taxpayers earning up to $60,400 would see their yearly taxes decline, and taxpayers earning $60,000 to $107,000 would see an increase on average of $20. $20. Now I'm going to add that those top earners, if you look back through history, starting with Reagan, they've had their tax rate cut over and over and over and over again. And our economy is so incredibly lopsided in that most of the wealth is controlled by that tiny, tiny upper crust of earners. A lot of they're not wage earners. They have a lot of money and they're hoarding it and they're investing it, that sort of thing. But the people at the very, very top have so much more money than the rest of us that when they increase taxes on them, it makes a real difference. It seriously does. If you want to look this stuff up, it's mind-blowing. Again, can't waste too much time on it. We're going to move on to deficits. And he's lying again. I know, shocking. He's lying again. Here we go.
To finish up, we now have the largest deficit in the history of our country under this guy.
I mean, he might have well just said that Joe Biden is Polynesian. Why not? He's not Irish. He's Polynesian. It's all a big ruse. He's wearing a rubber mask, and he's actually not chalk white pale. I'm chalk white pale myself, so I get that. I get that. I feel it. I throw it down, Joe Biden. Me and the Biden family we don't go out in the sun. We don't. If we do, we wear a lot of sunscreen. Anyway, I'm just saying that was a complete lie. So false, 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 false. We do not have the largest deficit in the history of our country under Joe Biden. According to data from the U.S. Treasury, the deficit grew to the largest it has been in 2 decades during the Trump administration. Say it loud. Say it proud. Deficit in the fiscal year 2023, $3.13 trillion. Trump. Deficit at the end of the fiscal year 2023, $1.7 trillion. Biden. Yes, it's big in both. They both had to contend with COVID-19, which is incredibly expensive, but just shut your mouth. You're lying, you're lying, you're lying. He keeps going with the deficits. These two were not even close to each other in the debate. I had to cut them and stick them together. Here's another deficit one.
We have the largest deficit with China.
The exact opposite is true. The U.S. trade deficit with China in goods and services was $252 billion in 2023. It's the lowest level since 2009. And now I'm doing a dance for our trade deficit with China. I'm doing a dance. Okay, I'm not. I'm just getting a little loopy. I'm in my apartment. This man gets me so mad. Here's another one. Regulations. You can probably guess where this one's going.
I also gave you the largest regulation cut in history.
And he's lying again. I know, shocking. So, false. There is no easy way to measure regulation cuts for different presidential administrations. Many have argued, and again, all this stuff with anything with economics, you can debate. Trust me. Many have argued the largest wave of regulation cuts came during the deregulation of airline, rail, and trucking industries during the Carter administration. That's sort of when the deregulation thing got started. It got much, much bigger during the Reagan administration. There's all this push for deregulation. But because those industries were so big under Carter, that's why they say it was under Carter. Also, the Penn program on regulation, and that was done by UPenn, it was this huge study, concluded that, and this is the quote, this was during the Trump administration. So, and it says Trump throughout, but not in this quote. So it says, without exception, each major claim we have uncovered by the president or other White House official about regulation turns out to be exaggerated, misleading, or downright untrue. So that's a lie. We're going to move on to immigration, and you know this is going to be a bloodbath. And I said bloodbath with no irony. I said that. With no irony. If you know Trump, you know what I'm talking about. Here we go.
Why he allowed millions of people to come in here from prisons, jails, and mental institutions to come into our country and destroy our country.
So Trump says this often, but he has no evidence to back it up. In other media appearances, Trump has singled out Venezuela and Congo as two countries that are intentionally sending prisoners to the United States. The Congo, as Trump likes to call it, is actually two different countries. Democratic Republic of Congo and neighboring Republic of Congo. Representatives from both countries have said that Trump's claims are false, and the former president has offered no proof to back up his statements. From 2021 to 2024, federal data shows immigration officials arrested 103,700 non-citizens with criminal convictions. According to factcheck.org, the FBI acknowledges some Venezuelan criminals have migrated to the U.S., but again, there's no indication they were purposely released from prison and then sent to the United States. And I didn't have time for it, but there's some hyperlinks, again, in the newsletter if you want to click on those and go deeper, that explain sort of like Venezuelan crime, Venezuelan immigration. There's nothing to back up what Trump's saying. You need actual evidence. You can't just make stuff up like he does and then say, haha, insane asylums, thousands of prisoners coming in. It's a lie.
We have a border that's the most dangerous place anywhere in the world, considered the most dangerous place anywhere in the world. And he opened it up, and these killers are coming into our country.
Now, I just want to point out he started that with, "We have a border." This is what he said later on.
We don't have borders anymore. Every state is now a border. And because of his ridiculous, insane, and very stupid policies, people are coming in and they're killing our citizens at a level that we've never seen. We call it migrant crime.
So although there have been some recent crimes allegedly committed by undocumented immigrants that have gotten a lot of media coverage, there's no evidence of an increase in this type of crime. According to the FBI, violent crime rates have decreased across the country, and multiple studies have shown, and this is over years, they keep doing them, they keep coming up with the same data. Immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than native-born Americans. He says this again.
Safest border in the history of our country.
So the quality of that audio isn't so great, but basically what he just said there is we had the safest border in the history of our country. That is not true. So he repeats that all the time. You'll hear his supporters say it. They believe it. It's just not true. If you look at long-term trends with immigration, we are definitely at a crisis right now, but we were kind of headed there under Trump. So this idea that he had this border sealed and nobody was crossing is just a myth. It's not even close. So if you look at the last 2 months of the Obama administration, that would be December 2016 and January 2017. December, he had 43,000, roughly 251 apprehensions. January, 31,576 apprehensions. Under Trump, the last 2 months of his administration, and again, this is during COVID. December 2020, he had 71,141 apprehensions at the border. And in January 2021, he had 75,316. So he's going to say another stupid number here that's nonsensical in the next clip.
Did anybody get fired for allowing 18 million people, many from prisons, many from mental institutions? Did you fire anybody that allowed our country to be destroyed?
So Custom and Border Patrol recorded 9.5 million encounters between February 2021 and April 2024. About 7.9 million of these have been at the southwest border. So yeah, we definitely have a problem. This is definitely a problem. Some of these encounters are people who have tried to enter the country multiple times, while 4 million of them were expelled. 3 million migrants were expelled due to Title 42, a law put in place during the pandemic to slow down the spread of COVID-19. So that number, 9.5, looks really big, but a lot of them were sent back immediately. And a lot of them were the same people trying over and over again. So government and independent analysis have estimated that about 1/4 to 1/2 of border control encounters have repeatedly tried to enter the U.S. illegally. So those are the same people doing it over and over again. The exact number of gotaways is unclear. Those are people that they determine got into the U.S., but they didn't basically catch them. They didn't process them. Fox News has estimated this number at 1.6 million, which has been picked up and repeated by countless Republican politicians. Many experts estimate that about 5 million migrants have entered the U.S. illegally, which is a large number, but nowhere near the outrageous numbers Trump has claimed. Because he's saying 20 million. He said 18 million, 19 million, 20 million. He just makes things up. It's absolutely maddening. And now he's going to talk about Biden's deal.
He came out with a nothing deal, and it reduced it a little bit, like this much. It's insignificant. He wants open borders.
Okay, there's no evidence that he wants open borders. None whatsoever. None. So he advocated for a bipartisan bill in Congress that would have curbed illegal immigration had it passed. The bill would have added 1,500 new border control agents and increased the number of detention beds. The legislation would have also raised the standard to gain asylum and expedite migrants who've already started the asylum process while expelling those who do not meet the criteria more quickly. He's actually been criticized by immigration advocates over this bill. They were critical of it, and they were critical of his EO, his executive order. So even Fox News conceded that the changes the Biden administration created via executive order has reduced the amount of illegal crossings. And they've said that on air. The latest estimate was a 40% drop. There's some contention about that, if that's accurate or not. It's brand new, so it's hard to tell. But now we're going to move on to terrorists.
terrorists. We have the largest number of terrorists coming into our country right now, all terrorists, all over the world, not just in South America, all over the world. They come from the Middle East, everywhere. All over the world, they're pouring in.
So again, this is a wild exaggeration. The number of people encountered at the southern border who are on the federal terror watch list has jumped from 3 in the past year of the Trump administration to nearly 100 in the last fiscal year of Joe Biden's presidency. So yes, 3 to 100 is an increase, but he's literally acting like it's millions of people. So the terrorist screening data set maintained by the FBI is not a list of known terrorists. It includes names of people who have suspected ties to individuals who might be affiliated with terror organizations. So it's sort of a wide net. It's definitely not, and we'll get into in part 2, I get into terrorist attacks, which he claims none happened during his administration, which is a bold-faced lie.
Just take a look at where they're living. They're living in luxury hotels in New York City and other places.
So I started seeing, as soon as he said that at the debate, people on Fox were repeating it the next day. And I'm just like, oh my God. Here we go. Now, they live in New York. Most of the people at Fox live here, and they know that's not true. We have luxury hotels here. If you want to spend a ton of money on a hotel room in New York City, you can do it. I mean, if you want to just be like, I need to set my money on fire, come to New York, stay at the Four Seasons or whatever, stay at the Plaza. You can get a big suite. You can spend a lot of money on a hotel. Migrants are not being put in those hotels. They are, in some cases, being put in hotels. And the reason is, I'm just going to break this down a little bit. 36% of the population of New York City is foreign born. So we have a very large immigrant population. It doesn't mean these people are all undocumented. But what happens is when you have immigrants who are already here, somebody immigrating to the United States, if they have a relative in the New York area, they're going to say, hey, I need to get to New York. So they end up here. And we've had a lot of them because Greg Abbott was, sending people on free bus rides all over the country to try to get rid of the burden on Texas. He's the governor of Texas. Got it. So New York did end up with quite a few of them. And in some cases, families were being put in hotels. Originally, they were putting like any migrants in some of these kind of smaller mid-range hotels. Trust me, they're not posh. They're putting them in these little hotels. And then that didn't work out because they said, we're going to put the families in there and the single men, you can go live in a tent on an island. I'm not kidding. That's where they were putting them, in these huge tents. In some cases, they're letting them sleep in cots in auditoriums. Not posh. And it's only temporary. So he's just lying again. So he starts blaming them for Social Security. And this is where it just gets off the rails.
And he's destroying Medicare because all of these people are coming in. They're putting them on Medicare. They're putting them on Social Security. They're going to destroy Social Security.
So this is completely backwards again. So new immigrants of all kinds, including undocumented, help increase the ratio of workers to retirees. Germany figured this out, which is why they let a lot of immigrants into Germany, because they knew their birth rate wasn't high enough. So most undocumented immigrants are ineligible for Social Security, which should make sense. Like if I went to Germany right now and said, hey, put me on your pension plan, they'd say, you need to pay some taxes and become a citizen. So yeah, you don't just get Social Security in the United States. The only exception are immigrants who enter the U.S. illegally, who are then granted humanitarian parole, which is a temporary position to stay in the U.S. It's a very small group. Most immigrants who enter the U.S. illegally are also not eligible for Medicare or Medicaid, although some states provide Medicaid coverage under state-funded programs for all residents. Immigrants are eligible for emergency Medicaid. And that's something you get in very specific instances. So they're not, definitely not getting Social Security. They're definitely, he's just making stuff up. He's just making stuff, nothing. And now he's going to lie more about medical stuff because that's what he does. He's a liar.
I'm the one that got the insulin down for the seniors. I took care of the seniors. What he's doing is destroying all of our medical programs because the migrants coming in.
Again, when in doubt, blame the migrants. Liar! You're a liar, you're a liar, you're a liar. So Trump established a voluntary $35 per month cap on insulin for Americans on Medicare. Only a limited number of Medicare plans lowered their prices to $35 a month. The Inflation Reduction Act, signed by Biden in 2022, required all Medicare plans to cap insulin at $35. The Biden administration also pushed to make the cap applicable to Americans on private insurance plans, but the provision to lower the price of insulin for all Americans was removed from the bill before it became law. Thank you, Republicans. They're the ones who removed it. Now we're moving on to addiction. He's still lying.
Jake, we were doing very well at addiction until the COVID came along. We had the 2.5, almost 3 years of like nobody's ever had before.
You are lying, 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 you're a liar. According to the CDC, there was an actual drop in overdose deaths from 2017 to 2018. So he had 1 year where it dropped, 1 year. So if he said we had one good year, he'd be telling the truth. But he didn't. He said 2.5, almost 3 years. Overdose deaths increased in 2019 and then shot up dramatically in 2020 at the start of the pandemic, which of course they got worse because it was a pandemic. Everybody was miserable. The entire healthcare industry was devoted to COVID-19. Drug use shot up, alcohol use shot up. We all know this. And so did overdose deaths. So he's lying. Now we're going to move on to everybody's favorite topic with him, abortion. Brace yourself. It's the last one for part one. It's the last one for part one. Here we go.
But they're voting, and it's bringing it back to the vote of the people, which is what everybody wanted, including the founders.
So he's implying that the founders, this is how nutty this is, that the founders, the founders of this country in the 18th century wanted abortion moved to the states, which at the time was 13 colonies, okay? We're going through this logic that the founders, again, of the United States, 13 colonies, wanted abortion moved to the states, even though Roe v. Wade wasn't passed until 1973. Make it sense. Make it make sense. I can't with his addled mind. So that's just one quote about abortion. We're going to move on to the next one.
And if you look at this whole question that you're asking, complex, but not really complex. 51 years ago, you had Roe v. Wade, and everybody wanted to get it back to the states. Everybody, without exception.
Liar, liar, pants on fire. When a case is heard before the Supreme Court, legal scholars are allowed to give their opinions about it. The docket for Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, the case that ultimately overturned Roe v. Wade, is filled, I read it, 49 pages of briefs and scholars saying that overturning decades of legal precedent would be a mistake. And there's a lot of debate over if Roe v. Wade should have been federal or state. A lot of debate. He's just completely making up reality. Now, this is the one that makes my blood boil, that literally causes me to like leap. Just picture me in my tiny apartment, like leaping at my laptop, about ready to throttle and just be like, I hate you. I hate you, you stupid man. Here we go.
That means he can take the life of the baby in the 9th month and even after birth, because some states, Democrat run, take it after birth.
So again, I am not alone on this one, but a lot of people, including some people on PBS NewsHour, which I just watched the Friday episode of that, were critical of the fact, they didn't say it, but they said people are critical of the fact that Dana Bash and Jake Tapper, and I get it, it's not their fault because this was the way this was set up. I don't blame them. I blame whoever came up with these rules. Had to just sit there and stone-faced look at Trump when he said that. So he actually said, so that means he could take the life of the baby in the 9th month and even after birth, because some states, Democrat-run states, take it after birth. That is such a lie that I cannot even... Where's the states, Trump? Please list the states where you can kill a baby after it's born. You can't. You can't kill a baby after it's born. You can't do it. It's not legal. It's infanticide. That would be murder. You can't do it. And women are not having abortions in the 9th month. They are not doing it. No, they're not. So, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, this is from 2019, 93% of reported abortions were performed at or before 13 weeks of pregnancy. 6% were conducted between 14 and 20 weeks. 1% were performed after 21 weeks. So late-term abortions are extremely rare and performed due to medical concerns such as fetal abnormalities or maternal life endangerment, as well as barriers to care that cause delays in obtaining an abortion. So about half of abortions performed in this country, they use medication, so it's not even surgery. a woman would go in, or a pregnant person would go in and they take a pill, and I believe they take 2 pills, and that's it. And then they have their period, and it's over. It's done. And in the case of a late-term abortion, when you're dealing with like a extreme pregnancy complication, you're going to have to, number one, find somebody who will even do a late-term abortion. You have to be approved. They have to go through a whole series of, depending on the state you're in, depending on the state you go to. Then the actual procedure is considered high risk. It costs a lot of money. It's a big ordeal. It's evaluation, the whole 9 yards. It's not a mild, easy, casual thing like Fox and Trump and other Republicans pretend it is. It is not. It is an ordeal. So that's just a lie, and he keeps lying about it, and I keep screaming. And that was so frustrating, and I think that's why I think so many of us are angry with how that debate went, is we were just sitting there watching this man lie after lie after lie after lie after lie, and nobody was, I mean, sometimes Biden would get one in, sometimes he wouldn't, but you almost have to be a super nerd like myself who has this stuff memorized to just go, stop, stop, stop. I mean, that's what I would love to do. I would love to do an experiment with him with a mic that I could shut off to get him to shut up and just be like, you're lying, boom. You're lying, boom. You're lying, boom. Nobody would let me do that. He's not stupid enough to let somebody do that to him, but he should, because he's just lying, lying, and lying. That's part 1. Part 2's coming up. I think the part 2's actually better, but I had to sort of organize them somehow, and that's what I did there. So if you'd like to check out more of Decoding Fox News, where I actually break down Fox News, you can check me out at Twitter, also known as X, Threads, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, although I'm not a huge fan of TikTok, but I am on TikTok. It's all good. And my Facebook fan page, also Blue Sky. You can go to all those places. I'm Decoding Fox News on everything, but on Facebook, my fan page is my name, Juliet Jeske, and on YouTube, it's also my name, Juliet Jeske. The podcast mascots, as always, Odin and Thor send their love. If you want to see a written version of this crazy podcast, please go to my Substack channel for all the hyperlinks so you can check out all my sources and double check that I'm not making this stuff up. And if you want to become a paid subscriber to Decoding Fox News, go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News, Patreon for Decoding Fox News, and I will see you at the next podcast.
Resolute Square.